Hi guys, so for my mythology research project, I decided to investigate the topic of food in mythology. So I had a few research questions, 6 to be exact, and some of them include how's the role of food in myths and folk tales differ across cultures? What are some examples of food in fairy tales, myths, folklores? What is significant about the role of food in these myths, and how important is food in these stories? And how this role of food differs across both cultures and time periods. And through my research, I formed a thesis statement, which is the role of food in myths and folk tales has evolved to show greater concern for health as well as more regard for children-dominant audience through the involvement of temptation. So to begin, I'm going to start talking about apples. We all know it. You know what an apple is, probably had it before. So many of these stories of mythology and fairy tales especially, and even folklore, a lot of them feature food as a temptation, and this can especially be seen in the apples. And especially in fantasy literature, the food is used as a weapon to lure children towards evil things. And one of these prime examples is Snow White, because as we all know, as we've seen in class, Snow White eats the poisonous apple. And before that, previously in the movie, we all know that she holds this innocent character, and that she's taking refuge in this comfort of having this innocence. But this red apple, it actually acts as a symbol of sex and temptation. So when she bites into it, she's embracing this sexual maturity, which is different from her innocence, and she's leaving behind this adolescence, and she's embracing this sense of new temptation and maturity sexually. So moving forward from fairy tales, I'm going to start talking about apples in Greek mythology. So Hera, which is the queen of the gods, she got a wedding present from Gaia, which is the earth mother, and that present was these apple trees. And these apple trees were guarded by a dragon, and they were tended by the Hesperides. And these apples weren't your average apple. They tasted like honey, and when they were eaten, they could renew themselves and become whole again. And if you threw the apple, they would always hit their target. So these apples weren't your average apples, but Hercules actually had some of these apples, and when he was traveling across North Africa, he got help from the giant Atlas. And Atlas entered the garden and then strangled the dragon that was protecting these apple trees, and then got the apples. And then Hercules took these apples to Greece. However, apples were also used in more ways in Greek mythology. For example, a golden apple was stolen from Hera's garden, which the apple trees grew. And that caused the Trojan War, which is a super big event in mythology, in Greek mythology. And Eris, which is the goddess of discord. So there was a wedding feast, but she was invited, and she was like, "Oh, I'm mad." So what she did was she threw one of these apples, which was labeled for the fairest, and it landed in the middle of the table. And Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite were like, "Oh, so who's this meant for?" And they all thought that it was meant for each of them. So they were arguing, and they asked Paris, "Hey, who's it meant for?" And Paris gave it to Aphrodite. And of course, Hera and Athena were like, "What?" So of course they were mad. So what they did was they sought for revenge by supporting the Greeks in the war that led to the fall of Troy. So this is why the phrase apple of discord is used to refer to something that's provoking an argument. And these apples were also used in Celtic and Norse mythology. In Celtic mythology, the apples are the fruits of the gods and immortality, and in Norse mythology, the apples symbolize eternal youth. So goddess Idun guarded these apples that kept the gods and goddesses young. However, Loki forced Idun to be carried off to these realms of giants, and in turn this made the gods grow old and gray. but they didn't want that. So this forced Loki to recapture Eden so that the gods could be young again. So, the Greek, Norse, and Celtic mythology, and even Snow White, I'd consider those to be pretty old, but something that's still modern and like actively talked about is the Bible. So, going back to my thesis statement, food is also used, more specifically, apples are used as temptation in the Bible. So, as we know, Adam and Eve were the first people on earth, and they lived in Eden. But God forbade them from eating the apples from this tree, and this tree is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. However, Adam and Eve, they just chased after the temptation, and they ate the apples anyways. So, in return, God forbade them from going to the Garden of Eden. So they gave into the temptation, which is why they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. So yeah, this is like a lot of talking, so I'm not really gonna eat, to be honest, even though this is a mukbang. It's just gonna be too long if I eat, so I'm just gonna do more talking. So moving on from apples, the apples aren't the only thing that act as a symbol of temptation in these stories. Food in general does, and this can especially be seen in Coraline, which I'm so excited to talk about. But so food, even though you won't really expect it, food plays a really big role in Coraline's journey from going to the other world and choosing if she wants to stay there or not. And in the beginning, when her parents make the food, Coraline isn't really pleased by that. So in the book, the real parents cook out of packets, and they try to make these dishes that are like creative and extravagant, but what Coraline is really appealed by is like the simplicity and the comfort foods that her parents make. Because it's not the taste that interests her, it's the fact that, wow, my parents love me enough to like listen to me and cook what I want, and that they want to satisfy me and they want to pay attention to my needs. But when her parents make the yucky food, or what she perceives as yucky, out of the packets, she sees it as if like they don't care for her. And a good example of this is in the scene where Coraline's mother, this is after she takes her shopping, back to school shopping, Coraline's mom offers to take Coraline grocery shopping, and like she says, hey, you can buy whatever, like you can buy something that you want. And then Coraline declines, surprisingly. And that's probably because she's just bitter because her mom wouldn't buy her these gloves that she wanted when they went back to school shopping. And like in that night, she ended up eating some spaghetti and microwave pizza. But she's still not pleased by this. And this just comes to further show that like it's not the food that she desires, but it's really the attention and company that she desires, because she doesn't just want her parents to like cook this random stuff, but like she wants her parents to show like affection and love. Also in Coraline, the other mother uses Coraline's weakness for food as a weapon to lure her in and tempt her to come to the other world and stay there so that she could take her soul. So the other mother, as we know, she created a world that she knew would interest Coraline, full of attention and love, and this can especially be seen in the beginning when she lures her with this grand feast where there's like drink dispenser thing, and they're like in their chandelier, I guess, that dispenses any drink that you want, and then there's this cool gravy train that like goes around and pours the gravy for you, and like all this fascinates Coraline because it's like, wow, my parents actually care about what I want, and it's all things that she likes. And when she initially succeeds at luring her in and making her tempted, be like, oh wait, I kind of like it here, like I want to stay, the other mother takes advantage of this, and she has her true intentions of taking Coraline's soul as well as the other children's soul. So in a sense, the food was used as a weapon because it was used as a way to tempt her and lure her in to this other world where the other mother actually had bad intentions and just wanted her soul. And finally, in the end of the story, Coraline's interactions with food changes after she saves her parents, like frees the souls of the lost children and stuff. The interaction with food changes. I should probably eat this. In the end of the story, like, she actually eats with her family, and her dad makes this home-cooked pizza. And this pizza was pretty different from what she was used to because it had stuff that she didn't really eat, like slices of green pepper, little meatballs, and even pineapple. And these weren't things that she normally ate, but she actually ate everything except the pineapple chunks because I guess she's just that type of person. But even though she doesn't eat the pineapple, she still ate things that she wouldn't really have eaten before, like earlier in the story, and she did so without complaining. And this just comes to show that, like, she has this newfound understanding of, like, the importance of food and the way it symbolizes her maturity and satisfaction with all aspects of her life, because now she's okay eating these things because now she's grateful that, like, her parents are giving her this attention and she doesn't have to worry about, like, the other mother and her using food as a weapon to lure her in, because now the other mother is gone and now she just focus on her parents and appreciate the food that they're giving her, because now she's no longer that little girl that's like, oh, I don't want to eat, oh, I don't want to eat this little meatball or whatever packet food out of packets. But she's matured and she's finally satisfied with her life, and she's okay eating these things and having her parents and eating what they're cooking. So the last thing I'd like to talk about is a folklore, and this story is called Moose Turd Pie. So this is a popular folklore story and legend in logging camps of Maine and railway construction camps in the West. And it's told by Utah Phillips, which is a popular folk singer. And in the story, a new worker comes to work without knowing that in this workplace, it's like a tradition that whoever complains about the food is one to cook next. Until the next person complains, and then when that person complains, they become the cook, so on. So that's just a custom in that workplace. But this new worker didn't know that. So obviously, for this story to happen, he had to complain about this food, and he became the cook now. So, of course, he was like, I don't want to cook. So to free himself of this job, he ends up making a pie out of moose poop, which is why moose turd pie. But when one of his coworkers eats this pie, of course they're disgusted by it, and it's like, ugh. So the coworker says, moose turd pie, good enough. And obviously that coworker becomes cook now. So this folklore story is pretty weird, but it actually comments on food in multiple ways, obviously, since it's not really food, but it's still pie, which is considered food. But first, it kind of comments on gender roles and how, like, men take for granted the fact that women are usually the ones doing the cooking, while the men are the ones doing the physical hard labor. And in regard to the food, as I said initially, now these stories on food, like, show a greater concern for health. So in a pretty humorous, ironic way, the story Moose Turd Pie, it kind of touches on the horror of eating this gross substance, which is poop. And again, this is kind of frowned upon. So in these folklore stories, there's more, they show more concern for this health, and it's like, oh, that's like gross. And if this was something in the past, it's probably something that would have been as big. And as we saw in, like, the Grimm's version of Snow White, to prove that Snow White died, the guy had to cut out her lungs and her liver and boil them with salt. And after boiling them with salt, then the wicked woman would eat it. So obviously, since something that's a story in the past, it's not really like if you were to view it in the past, it wouldn't be something that's super shocking, but looking at it now, it's like, ew. So it's kind of the same thing with this moose turd pie story. So since it's something more modern, like eating the moose turd is more of something that's gross and something that's unhealthy and weird. So yeah. I kind of didn't really refer to the sources that I used when I was like saying my evidence. So the stuff about the apples, about the Greek, Norse, and Celtic mythology, I got that from the Myths Encyclopedia, and then I got some of my analysis of Snow White, of my Snow White apple analysis from Medium, and then I got my folklore story from Encyclopedia of Food and Culture. And then I got some of my talking points about Coraline from Nothing More Delicious: Food as Temptation in Children's Literature by Mary A. Steffens. So yes, that is it. I'm still gonna eat this food, so I'm gonna enjoy that, but thank you. Please give me an A because I'm gonna eat it.